Today's episode is a cannot miss episode if you work with preschoolers with autism and you're concerned about their speech development. We are going to do a deep dive into motor imitation. And why motor imitation? What is it about motor imitation? I can't wait to dive into the largest study so far that looked at preschoolers and the connection between motor imitation and spoken language outcomes at kindergarten age. This study is incredible because we're looking at a large N of 707 children. This study seals the deal in which the research in the last 20 years has told us motor imitation doesn't matter a little, it matters a lot when it comes to spoken language outcomes. We're going to go under the hood and talk about the neuroscience behind why motor imitation is so important to speech and communication development, why it's a pivotal skill, and if it's not part of your intervention program, it definitely should be, especially for children that are at risk for not developing speech. So before I dive into these details, and these details matter not a little, these details matter a lot, I'm going to give you a little bit of background of where I'm coming from. So you know, if you know me, that I obsess about autism speech development. This is something that I've been researching for years and years that keeps me up at night. And it wasn't until maybe 5 years into my career that I realized what a difference motor made. So I looked at all of the kiddos that I worked with 5 years into my career, and I did headstands. I did everything. I looked at the research. I did every approach out there to develop speech, everything that was something that made a difference. You better believe I added that to develop speech for my kiddos. However, I looked at this list of perhaps 10 kiddos where speech did not develop. And I did every research-based technique out there to help develop speech. Now, those of you that are saying, what about AAC? That's communication. Of course I was using AAC, but I wanted speech as well. Speech is the most efficient form of communication, and it does matter whether or not speech develops during those preschool years. The research indicates that if speech develops in the preschool years, the prognosis for them becoming fluent speakers through school age and as adults is much better. So neuroplasticity is at the highest level. There is a lot of pressure, if you're a speech pathologist, to really develop that speech. And of course, we're using AAC the whole way, and AAC does help with speech development. But now we're going to get down to what about the motor imitation? So I was looking at every single child that I worked with that did not develop speech. And I thought, what is the pattern? What do they all have in common? And what that was their motor skills. They had very poor postural control. These were the kiddos that would have someone sit next to them, or if someone wasn't sitting next to them, they would fall over. And this is after 2 years of receiving intervention. These were children whose mouths were open, drool was coming out of the sides of the mouth. These are children that couldn't independently walk from point A to point B without someone holding their hand. Their motor skills were severely impaired. They could not sit up independently and hold their own body. They were at a postural control level. So do you see why speech did not develop? It took me 5 years to realize this. There was a pattern. The children who had not developed speech, which develops lastly, all lacked core postural control strength. So this is very important. Motor matters. We can't treat a mouth. Children don't have wings, they can't fly. We have to begin with the core. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later and why motor imitation is so important. And I was having the children sit at the table because it was kind of structured, and I was doing milieu therapy. So I'd have, for instance, a farmhouse, and we'd make the different animal sounds, and then they would get the different animals, and we'd play. But it was seated, and that kind of gave me a little bit of structure in which I could get a lot of naturalistic trials done. They're using their augmentative communication. We're using vocalizations. It's engaging. The chair made them focused and in the area. That's pretty much what I did my first 5 years. I would take a bag of play toys and we would go at it, and I would have them imitate, they would request, answer questions, and we're just all doing that within the context of play activities. But what happened was I wasn't working on their bodies, I was working on their mouths. So I was really missing the boat that this child, of course, was not going to talk, was not going to use eye contact, or was not going to point because they were falling off their chair. They couldn't even hold their body up, and the core develops first. Then the musculature that's proximal to the core, the neck, the shoulders. Then after that, we go distal, and distal, we're talking about finger pointing. We're talking about lip movements. We're talking about eye contact. We're talking about tongue movements for speech. That develops lastly. I know it took me 5 years to realize this, but I was going right for the speech. I was going right for the pointing. I was going right for the eye contact. I was going for those social conventions when the motor skills, the base, the core had not yet developed. But we weren't taught in graduate school, we weren't taught at the continuing ed courses to look at the body. We were taught to look at the head and the mouth, and that's how you develop speech. But that's not the way it works. Speech develops from inside out. It starts at the core, and then it moves out distantly to the lips, to the tongue, to the eyes. So maybe it took me a while to get it, but I got it, and I did something different. But let's talk about doing something different today. This study found that these children who weren't talking in the beginning, and then they received 2 years of intervention, and it was evidence-based quality intervention. It was 10 hours a week of intervention. A third of these children didn't end up talking. A third of these children, they didn't start saying phrases and combining words. They didn't say sentences 2 years later. They didn't make gains. The preschoolers they looked at, even though they received high quality, evidence-based intervention, 10 hours a week, a third of them, some received TEACCH, some received more of a traditional ABA, some received a developmental ABA, which is a hybrid blend of play-based and discrete learning, and some received the Denver model, which is more developmental in nature and more of a comprehensive preschool program that provides visual supports and things of that nature in a more multimodal learning environment. So what they found is still a third of them they call, in quotes, non-advancers in terms of spoken language. This is the biggest study yet to look at who develops speech and who doesn't develop speech. And as a result, I'm going to get out my crystal ball. We have a crystal ball. Now, when we have a crystal ball like this, what's exciting is we can go back in time and do something different. We can learn what was not working in the past and tinker with it to do something different. So that's why we're here today. We're going to do a deep dive, and we're going to go under the hood of the brain and look at the neuroscience behind motor imitation and how that's connected to speech. So what they found in this study is a couple things mattered. The age the child started the intervention, how long was the child in the intervention? They looked at children from 6 months to 2 years in length. Was the child just in the intervention for 6 months? That's just not long enough. They also looked at the ADOS score. How severe was the autism? Did this child have a severe autism rating with that score? If so, they were less likely to advance in speech. Lastly, they looked at motor imitation. In 107 children, they found across the board those that weren't speaking at all, those that were using some single words that didn't make progress, they had poor motor imitation skills. That was the kind of distinguishing factor. Now, they didn't, unfortunately, have the information such as the motor skill development. They just didn't have that information. And the research indicates that poor motor skills are also associated with poor speech outcomes. And they didn't have the information on their phonemic inventory. For instance, was the child just a centralized vowel maker, or was the child producing a variety of diphthongs, a variety of vowels and consonants? The research also indicates that's a better indicator of better outcomes. So there were some things that they just didn't have the information for when they were looking at 707 children, but they did on motor imitation. And motor imitation mattered a lot. So we need to take motor imitation seriously if we want to improve the speech outcomes. So we're going to take this crystal ball of 707 children from this hot off the press, largest study yet, looking at what predicted speech. You got to pay attention to this one. And they looked at a variety of interventions. So if you're an audience today, I'm assuming that perhaps you're working with a child in a TEACCH classroom, or perhaps you're working with a child that's receiving ABA, or something that's a blended play-based ABA type of program. So this applies to you. This probably applies to the children on your back porch and how you can do something differently. What the body of research supports is that motor imitation does not matter a little, it matters a lot. So let's look at today 5 reasons why motor imitation matters a lot, and we want to include it in our speech therapy. Now, my way of including motor imitation in speech therapy is I do multimodal cueing with the children, with speech and language. I also use books. It's universal design for learning principles. I use books that we sing and we do movements with, and we do obstacle courses in which the children engage in task-oriented movement activities, which means there's a lot of planning, programming, execution in a multi-step manner to achieve a goal, which is basically exactly what speech is. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So we're basically connecting the prefrontal cortex to the cerebellum in planning, programming, and executing. We're building that pathway when we do task-oriented movement activities. Let's go into this motor imitation and 5 reasons why, if you're working with preschoolers with autism, we want to double down on motor imitation and make sure it's included in your intervention plan. The first reason, and this is, I think, really cool, is from the field of neuroscience. And they found that when children were imitating other people, motor imitation, their mirror neurons in their brain at that time would double. So what we know about children with autism, mirror neurons is like when you see someone else do it, it's almost as if you're doing it as well, right? Those mirror neurons activate. We know from children with autism, they have less activation of mirror neurons. Now, mirror neurons are important because when you see someone who's sad, you're going to feel sad. If you see someone happy, you're going to feel happy. So it helps you build empathy, perspective taking. It's not an external type of skill. It's an internal one that happens neurologically. But if we know that we can activate those mirror neurons, double the activation when we're doing motor imitation, this is a powerful way to improve, when neuroplasticity is at the highest level, empathy and perspective taking, motor imitation. So I love social stories, but the research indicates that social stories is not going to accomplish that skill. However, motor imitation, the research indicates, will, by increasing the mirror neuron activation. So the second reason why we're going to double down on motor imitation if we want to improve speech outcomes is because motor imitation is how children interplay with one another. They don't say, "Can I play? I want a turn. Can I play with you? Can you share your toys?" Preschoolers don't do that. They don't talk, they do. And what they do is they do what the other child's doing. So if you want to interplay with a child that's building with Legos, You build with Legos. That's the way you enter the play. That's the way you join another child in play. You do it by doing what they're doing. You do it through motor imitation. So that's why motor imitation is so important. It's a gatekeeper. If you want to open that gate so that children can join their neurotypical peers or their peers in play, they got to be able to imitate what that other child is doing. That's the secret. That's the language of preschoolers. Do what I do, and that's how you join me. So this is a very powerful social skill. We always teach things through words. Oh, you see a friend, what do you say? Say, hi, my name is, no one does that. Do you want to play with me? No, they don't do that. They do what the other child's doing. Number 3, why we really care about motor imitation, why we want to make sure it's in our therapy, is that motor skills and speech develops through imitation. So we learn by watching others. That's how we learn in doing what others do. So it's a very much a constructivist way of learning. And we know that because children who grew up in isolated conditions did not learn these basic social skills. They did not learn basic self-help skills. We learn from watching others. So not only do motor skills develop, but also speech develops from others. For instance, if you're potty training a child and you're going to go potty like dad goes potty or like your brother goes potty, and then you're going to go potty as well, right? This is a complex motor skill. You learn it from motor imitation, and then you do it yourself to automaticity. So when you develop those motor skills, that's really important, you learn it from what comes first, from imitation, from seeing, observing it, being modeled, and then you do it yourself. We need that model. So what we want to do is develop the motor skills. And in order to develop these motor skills, they need to be able to observe it from another and then be able to copy it. Not only does motor skills develop from imitation, which we know are delayed largely, it's a core characteristic for children with autism is a delay in motor skills. We know that in order for them to learn the motor skills, they have to be able to imitate the motor skills. In order for them to learn how to talk, they need to be able to imitate the speech. In speech, you can look at as a complex motor skill. Okay, so we're developing that ability to imitate a motor action. Number 4, you're going to rewire the brain. Now, what we know from the neuroscience is children with autism, they have connectivity breakdowns from the prefrontal cortex, in which you have the idea, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to, this is my plan, to the cerebellum, in which you're saying, these are the motor actions I'm going to perform. This is the plan, this is where the programming and the execution is going to happen. So we have the two talking back and forth, this loop from this is my plan, and this is how I'm going to program it, and this is how it's going to be executed. What we know under the hood from the neuroscience research is that many children with autism have breakdowns between the pathway. So when we're doing motor imitation, you have, this is what I want to do, right? So maybe the child wants to do the eensy weensy spider. I see it being done. This is what I want to do. I'm going to make the spider, right? And they're going to go up. That's my idea. Then I'm going to take it to my cerebellum and I'm going to do this. This is the program, and I'm going to execute it. And then they do it. So once again, we're creating that pathway. We're creating connections. We're rewiring the brain, which is saying, okay, that prefrontal to cerebellar, that connectivity there, we're going to strengthen it. And we're going to do that from using it. We're going to use it. We're going to make those connections, and that develops automaticity. We're creating this pathway. When we create that pathway, then it's going to be easier to talk, where we have an idea and then we act it out with the cerebellum and the complex motor movement and the timing involved in it. We're rewiring the brain with early motor imitation. This is what I want to do. Whoop, I'm going to do it. Number 5. Now, I think this is like the most important of all to remember is that speech develops lastly. Now, that's what it took me a while to get that. It took me 5 years to figure out what is going on with these children. I've done everything in the universe, and we're not developing speech. Motor matters. Remember, the core needs to develop first. Kids don't have wings, they can't fly. You can't start distally. You can't have these children talking, using eye contact, pointing. They can't be doing that when they can't even hold up their body. They don't have postural control. They have no anchor. So they're always going to develop from the core, and then it's going to develop proximally to the shoulders, to the neck. Then we're going to go down to the arms, to the wrist, and then very lastly to the fingers and the point. Very lastly to the lips and the eyes. And that's not easy, especially with lip movement because of the proprioception issues as well, and knowing where your lips are in space. So many of my kiddos with autism, they actually need to touch their lips to get those things together and know where they are, to say ba, because they can't feel their lips, whether their lips are together. They're just so distal, so out there. And then it just takes time and practice. Then we develop that automaticity. So the whole idea behind when we look under the hood and why motor imitation is so connected to speech, as we see in this important study of 707 preschoolers who received best practice intervention. They got 10 hours a week of high quality intervention, but yet they didn't advance. And when you say, well, motor imitation is something they all had in common, that was a skill that was very challenging for them. We need to DSD. We have the crystal ball. And what I want you to do is I want you to say, how can I focus more on motor imitation and improving motor imitation so that I can improve the likelihood that this child can develop speech, so that I can improve the likelihood that this child develops social communication skills so that they can interact with their peers and with others, so that I can improve the likelihood that this child develops empathy so that then when they're seeing someone else, they're feeling what that person's feeling because of the motor imitation and the mirror neurons that are activated as the brain becomes rewired and working to its potential. So we can do some amazing work at an early level. And this is nothing new. But what this article does is it does cement what we already know. It does say on a large scale, look, we looked across these different interventions and we looked across different locations all over the world. There are different back porches, different children with different skill sets, where some of them were talking at the word level and some of them weren't talking at all. But those that didn't advance, they all had this in common. They had poor motor imitation skills. And what I like about this article is they're saying maybe we shouldn't give the same prescription to every child. If you see a child that has a severe ADOS score and they have poor imitation skills, you have the crystal ball, which says, we see that this child is less likely to develop speech. So what can we do differently to help this child develop speech? Let's do more motor imitation with this child. Let's do more of a focus on the speech development and using multimodal cueing and an approach that we'd use with a child, for instance, who has child apraxia of speech, which is multimodal in nature, in which you're slowing your speech, in which you're using your gestures, in which you're making explicit what is implicit, knowing from the research that this child is less likely to develop speech. Perhaps we're going to start spending more time and earlier. Of course, I'm always starting from day one if the child doesn't have speech, but with AAC and saying, this might be a child that learns to read first and then learns to talk, because the motor imitation is not a strength. This is a weakness for this child. Maybe we need to go through the back door. Not only do they learn to talk after learning to read, Or if they didn't learn to talk, they learned to spell. But they learn to spell in preschool to get their message out so they're not locked in. They learn to say what they want by typing the words out on a computer. They have a way to communicate. Why do they have a way to communicate? Because they were given a robust system. Because maybe they're like a third of these children that received wonderful intervention, but they didn't develop speech. But you know what? They can write. They can read. So thinking about this, it gives us a crystal ball, but it doesn't give us a crystal ball to passively do what we're doing and continue with status quo. It gives us a crystal ball in which we can say, let's DSD. Let's do something different in which we take our eggs and we say, let's put more eggs in the speech basket. This child likely has a speech motor disorder and is not going to naturally develop speech. So as a result, we're going to take some additional efforts to make speech more salient. This child does not have motor imitation, and we know that motor imitation is strongly connected with speech outcomes. So we're going to put more of our eggs in the motor imitation basket. And don't do it where you're having the kids clap their hands. You do this, and then you give them M&Ms. Oh, we're better than that. Go get a fun, like in my CIS membership, we're doing from head to toe. Go and do the penguin, shaking the head back and forth and make your hair look all over the place. The kid thinks is hilarious by Eric Carle. Do that activity with the kiddos. And then they're imitating you. We can do better than that. But we're still focusing on motor imitation. We can provide them with educationally rich activities, but motor imitation, it's in there because it matters. That's what I leave you with today. This is an important study. I'm going to leave this citation on this episode, and you have it on your hands. You know what to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to DSD. We're going to do that to help our children reach their potential by taking advantage of this knowledge when brain is at its highest level in terms of neuroplasticity. Okay, so I want you to do what you do best, roll up your sleeves. And by the way, if you are going to be in Lexington, Kentucky, I'm so excited. I've been invited to speak there on February 20th, 2025, the Lexington, Kentucky Speech Language Hearing Association. I'm going to do a presentation on autism and apraxia there. I'm so excited about that. This is something where my ADHD, I've been hyper-focusing on speech outcomes with autism only for about 25 years now. So I'm very excited to present in Lexington, Kentucky on February 20th. If you're going to be there, I can't wait to see you. We're going to dive deep. Okay. And I'm also going to be presenting on how to bring literacy to life with movement, which is about motor imitation as well. So I hope to see you in Lexington, Kentucky on February 20th for those two presentations. That's going to be a Friday. I heard Lexington is a pretty fun city. So if you're looking for a spring break, Lexington, Kentucky is the place to be. And if you're looking for a fun learning experience, make sure to check out my presentations at the Lexington Speech Language Hearing Association. I'll be doing one on apraxia and autism, and I'll be doing one on bringing books to life to increase. Do what you do best, roll up your sleeves and make the world a better place, one child at a time. You are always going to be first.